Hello everybody. Today I will be going over the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian defense. And to begin, we will start with e4 by white, which controls the center of the board. And the Sicilian defense begins with black making the move c5. This move counterattacks the center, including the d4 square. And the next move for white will be knight to f3, which covers the d4 and e5 squares, controlling the center. Now, in the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian, the next move for black will be d6, and this move covers the e5 square. It also protects the c5 pawn, but by covering the e5 square, later on black may want to move his knight to f6, and by covering the e5 square with the d6 pawn, it prevents the white pawn on e4 from attacking an f6 knight by moving to e5. So the next move we have by white is d4, which controls the center. It attacks the e5 square, and by placing both pawns in the center, white is looking pretty powerful in the center, and black doesn't want to allow this. So the next move for black will be c takes d4, and to keep the material even, white takes the pawn on d4 with his knight. Now if you look at the position here, white is in the center with a knight and a pawn, but he only has one pawn in the center to black's two central pawns. So it unbalances the position a little bit, but white does have a lead in development. Next, black moves knight to f6, attacking the e4 pawn, and white will move knight to c3, protecting that pawn. And the next move, pawn to a6, is the beginning of the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian defense. And from here, the game can branch out into many different variations. I will go over briefly three possible variations that can occur. One possibility is for white to continue developing with bishop to e2, which allows him to castle kingside shortly after. And black may continue by attacking in the center with e5, which forces white to retreat his knight to b3. Next, black can go bishop to e7, and he is ready to castle on his next move if he chooses to do so. So white continues development. Bishop to e3, which helps control the center of the board. Next, black castles his king to safety, and white does likewise. And now black can continue his development with bishop to e6, and white can move the queen, allowing room for his rooks to move into the center of the board and get more activity. Black continues with knight to c6, and he has also nearly completed his development off the back rank. And from here, white can move rook to d1, He could move his next rook to e1. Before we go any deeper, I will go back to the initial position. Move number 5, a6 by black, the beginning of the Najdorf variation. Now here, in the previous example, we moved our bishop to e2, like this. But in this next example, we'll change that up and move our move our bishop from c1 to g5, and show you a few moves in another variation of the Najdorf. So after white moves bishop to g5, black has a few different possibilities, but one move he may choose is e6. And this move, it helps control the center. It also allows black, if white decides to capture this knight, he could recapture with the queen and avoid doubling his pawns. So white can continue with pawn to f4, attacking the center, preparing for later kingside pawn moves towards the opponent's king. And black moves bishop to e7, preparing to castle. And then white continues with a kingside attack by moving queen to f3. And black likewise develops his queen to c7. And we have queenside castling for white in this position. Black continues his development, and white pushes a pawn, which will allow him later, if black decides to castle on the king's side, to use his pawns to attack towards the king. Black then counterattacks on the queen side towards white's queen, starting with a pawn thrust to b5. So this is another possible way the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian can play out. You notice, especially if black decides to castle kingside and white is castled queenside, it then may become a race with black attacking the white queen on the queen side and white using his pawns to attack on the king side. It will be a race to see who can break through first. Now, if we go back to the beginning, we'll do a quick review of the opening moves. e4, c5, the Sicilian defense. White continues knight to f3. Black moves pawn to d6. White attacks in the center with d4. Black captures on d4, not allowing white to have two central pawns. White recaptures the pawn. Knight attacks with his knight on f6. He attacks the e4 pawn, forcing white to cover that pawn. And then a6 by black is the beginning of the Najdorf variation. We went over the bishop to e2 move and the bishop to g5 move for white. So in this next position, we'll briefly touch on a bishop to c4 move for white. Now, this bishop has a commanding diagonal targeting f7, possibly. So, a good move for black would be e6 to block this attack by the bishop. White is then able to castle quickly. Black moves his bishop to e7, also preparing for possible kingside castling. White continues his development with bishop to e3, a good outpost for this bishop, attacking towards the king side, controlling the center, and also attacking towards the queen side. Black castles king side, getting his king into safety, and the rest of the game may proceed with a possible queen move by white and centralizing both of his rooks, and black will continue to develop his pieces and centralize his rooks as well. So there you have it. We did a quick rundown of the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian defense and a few possible variations for white to choose to play against the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. Thank you and have a good day.